4 centuries, the world knew a vast and ancient civilization by a single name: Persia, a land of emperors, poets, gardens, and empires that stretched from the Mediterranean to the mountains of Central Asia. Yet in the 20th century, something unusual happened, because almost overnight maps, textbooks, and diplomatic language began using a different name, Iran, and many people assumed this was simply a rebranding or political decision. But the deeper story is far more complex, stretching across more than 2,000 years of identity, language, conquest, and cultural memory. In this video, we begin the first part of a 2-part journey into the history behind how Persia became Iran, revealing that the transformation was not a sudden change, but the result of long historical processes involving ancient tribal identities, imperial propaganda, linguistic evolution, and modern nationalism. And to understand this transformation, we must travel back long before modern politics to the origins of the Iranian peoples themselves. The roots of the name Iran lie in the ancient word Aryānām, meaning land of the Aryans, a term used by Indo-European tribes who migrated across Central Asia thousands of years ago. And according to linguistic and archaeological research, these groups shared cultural and linguistic ties with Indo-European populations that spread across Eurasia, gradually forming distinct Iranian-speaking communities that settled across the Iranian plateau. Regions that today include modern Iran, Afghanistan, and parts of Central Asia. Long before the world used the name Persia, the people living in this region already identified their homeland through variations of the word Iran, particularly in ancient inscriptions and royal texts. But the outside world encountered the region through a different path, because the name Persia actually comes from Pars or Persis, a province in southern Iran that was home to one particular tribe whose power eventually transformed global history. This tribe, the Persians, rose to prominence in the 6th century BCE under the leadership of Cyrus the Great, founder of the Achaemenid Empire, one of the largest empires the ancient world had ever seen, stretching from the Indus Valley to the Aegean Sea. And when Greek historians encountered this empire, they referred to it as Persis, after the region where its ruling dynasty originated. And from the Greek perspective, it was natural to call the entire empire Persia. Even though many different peoples and languages lived within its borders, Greek writers such as Herodotus popularized this name throughout the Mediterranean world, and over centuries it spread through Roman, Byzantine, and later European languages, eventually becoming the dominant international term for the region. While internally the inhabitants continued using words derived from Iran to describe their cultural and geographic identity, the distinction between external and internal naming is crucial to understanding the later transformation, because throughout the centuries that followed the fall of the Achaemenid Empire through the Parthian and Sassanid dynasties, the concept of Iran remained deeply embedded in royal ideology, particularly during the Sassanid period, beginning in the 3rd century CE, when rulers explicitly described their domain as Ern-Shah, meaning Kingdom of the Iranians, and inscriptions from this era show that the name Iran functioned as a political and cultural concept, uniting various Iranian-speaking peoples under imperial authority. However, the fall of the Sassanid Empire in the 7th century, following the Arab conquest of Persia, dramatically reshaped the region's political landscape, introducing Islam, Arabic language influence, and new administrative systems. Yet even during this transformation, the concept of Iran survived in literature, mythology, and collective memory, particularly within the Persian language tradition, that continued to flourish under Islamic dynasties. Poets such as Ferdowsi in the 10th and 11th centuries played an enormous role in preserving Iranian identity through epic literature, most famously in the Shahnameh, a monumental work recounting the legendary and historical kings of Iran, reinforcing a sense of continuity between ancient Persia and the Islamic-era Persianate world. And through such works the idea of Iran persisted as a cultural identity, even while the state itself fragmented into competing dynasties. Throughout the medieval period, Foreign observers continued using the word Persia because they associated the region with Persian culture, language, and influence, especially as Persian became a dominant literary and administrative language across large parts of the Islamic world, extending far beyond the borders of modern Iran into Central Asia, South Asia, and Anatolia, meaning that Persia became both a geographic label and the symbol of a broader cultural civilization. By the time European travelers, diplomats, and merchants interacted with the Safavid Empire in the 16th century, the name Persia had become firmly entrenched in Western vocabulary, appearing in maps, trade agreements, and diplomatic correspondence, even though internally the rulers still referred to their domain in variations of the word Iran. The Safavid dynasty itself played a critical role in shaping the identity of the region, because it established Twelver Shia Islam as the state religion, creating a distinctive religious identity that set Iran apart from its Sunni neighbors and helped unify diverse populations under a common political framework. And this period also strengthened the Persian language and court culture that outsiders continued to associate with the name Persia. Yet the tension between the two names Persia and Iran remained largely invisible to outsiders for centuries, simply because Europeans had grown accustomed to one term, while local populations used another in cultural and historical contexts. And it was not until the 20th century, amid rising nationalism, modernization, and geopolitical pressure, that this linguistic duality would erupt into an official transformation that surprised the world. In the early 20th century, Iran was undergoing dramatic change under Reza Shah Pahlavi, a ruler determined to modernize the country, strengthen central authority, and redefine national identity in the context of global politics. And part of this project involved reconnecting the modern state with its ancient pre-Islamic heritage, emphasizing continuity with the civilizations that had once dominated the region. In 1935, the Iranian government formally requested that foreign governments begin using the name Iran instead of Persia in official correspondence and international contexts, a decision that caused confusion abroad because many people assumed Persia and Iran referred to different places entirely, when in reality they were two names for the same historical land. Historians note that this shift was influenced by multiple factors, including rising nationalism, the desire to assert independence from colonial narratives, and the growing importance of ethnic identity in global politics during the interwar period, though interpretations vary among scholars regarding the extent to which these motives shaped the decision. Some experts argue that adopting the name Iran emphasized the broader identity of the Iranian peoples rather than focusing solely on the Persian ethnic group, while others suggest it was part of a broader attempt to strengthen national unity and modern statehood. Regardless of the precise motivations, the change gradually reshaped international language, with maps, textbooks, and diplomatic institutions slowly adopting the new terminology, though even today the word Persia continues to survive in cultural contexts, particularly when referring to art, poetry, cuisine, and the historical empires that once ruled the region. This dual identity remains one of the most fascinating aspects of Iranian history because it reflects the layered nature of the country's past, where ancient tribal names, imperial traditions, Islamic civilization, and modern nationalism all overlap, producing a cultural narrative far richer than a simple name change might suggest. How the change reshaped international perception, and how Iranians themselves debated the meaning of the shift. Even today, the legacy of Persia lives alongside the name Iran in culture, history, and global imagination. The official request was made in 1935 during the reign of Reza Shah Pahlavi. Foreign embassies and international organizations were instructed to refer to the country as Iran. Although the change was technically simple, its cultural consequences were more complicated. For centuries, Europeans associated Persia with poetry, luxury goods, carpets, and miniature paintings, and the grand empires described in classical texts. The sudden disappearance of the familiar name created confusion among scholars and travelers. They wondered whether Persia had somehow become a different country. Historians note the global reaction revealed how deeply Persia was embedded in Western historical imagination, appearing in literature, art history, and academic research for generations. Even after official adoption of Iran, many cultural institutions continued using Persia for historical periods, a practice that still persists today when museums describe Persian art or Persian architecture. Inside the country itself, reactions to the change were more nuanced. Many intellectuals supported Iran to emphasize a broader national identity beyond the Persian ethnic group. Others worried that abandoning Persia might disconnect the modern state from its celebrated cultural heritage, especially the literary and artistic traditions that had made Persian civilization famous worldwide. These debates reflected deeper questions about identity in the 20th century. Iran was undergoing rapid modernization, centralization, and political reform under Reza Shah. The government sought to strengthen a unified national identity capable of competing in a world of powerful nation-states. Part of that effort involved highlighting the ancient roots of Iranian civilization, including the legacy of the Achaemenid Empire and other pre-Islamic dynasties, as symbols of continuity and national pride. The emphasis on ancient heritage also served political purposes. By invoking the grandeur of early Iranian empires, the state could promote a narrative of historical strength and independence at a time when foreign influence and colonial pressure had deeply affected the region. Scholars point out many countries in the 20th century engaged in similar projects of historical reinterpretation. Yet the story did not end with the 1935 decision. In 1959, another development added further complexity. The Iranian government announced that both names, Persia and Iran, could be used interchangeably in international contexts, recognizing that the older term still carried cultural significance and familiarity abroad. This policy acknowledged that the country possessed a dual historical identity, one rooted in modern nationhood and another preserved in centuries of artistic and literary tradition. This dual identity can still be seen in language today. Many elements of culture remain described as Persian, including the Persian language, poetry, rugs, and cuisine, while the political state is known internationally as Iran, illustrating how cultural memory and national terminology can evolve differently over time. Beyond naming conventions, the 20th century also witnessed dramatic political transformations, including the rise and fall of the Pahlavi monarchy, the oil nationalization movement, and Cold War struggles, events that influenced how the country was perceived internationally and how its own citizens understood their history. Perhaps the most significant turning point came with the Iranian Revolution of 1979, which replaced the monarchy with the Islamic Republic, fundamentally transforming the country's political structure. While the revolution introduced new religious and political narratives into national identity, it did not erase the deeper historical layers of Iranian culture, which continued to include pre-Islamic traditions, Persian literary heritage, and the enduring memory of ancient empires. Historians emphasize that modern Iranian identity is not defined by a single era or ideology, but by a complex synthesis of influences including ancient Iranian traditions, Islamic civilization, and Persian literary culture, and modern political experiences, all of which contribute to how the country understands itself. The persistence of the name Persia in cultural contexts reflects the lasting power of historical memory. Names connected to art, literature, and ancient empires often survive long after political boundaries change. In the case of Iran, the global fascination with Persian culture has ensured the older name remains familiar and respected, even as the modern state operates under a different designation, creating a rare situation in which two historical identities coexist rather than replace one another completely. Scholars describe this as a layered identity, where Persia represents the civilizational heritage that stretches back thousands of years, while Iran represents the contemporary nation-state that emerged through modern political history, and together these two concepts form a continuous narrative. Understanding this layered identity also reveals why the phrase Persia became Iran can be misleading. The transformation was not a replacement, but a shift in how the same civilization chose to present itself, aligning international terminology with a name that had always existed internally. The deeper lesson of this story, that names carry power, memory, and meaning far beyond simple geography, shaping how people imagine places, histories, and identities across generations. The evolution from Persia to Iran demonstrates how language, politics, and culture intersect to redefine a nation's place. Today, when we hear Iran, we refer to a country whose history stretches across millennia, encompassing the achievements of ancient empires, the brilliance of Persian literature and art, and Islamic civilization, and the complex realities of modern geopolitics. When we hear Persia, we are often touching the cultural memory of that same long civilization, reminding us that history rarely moves in straight lines, but instead layers new identities upon old ones. Through exploring this story, from ancient Aryan tribes to modern diplomacy, we see that the secret history behind how Persia became Iran is not a tale of disappearance, but one of continuity, adaptation, and enduring cultural legacy that continues to shape the identity of one of the world's oldest civilizations today.